What will a Tristan Wirfs extension look like? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Monday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, plus one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I'm going to start things off by apologizing in advance for the audio quality. I was trying to go live at around 1 o'clock, and my soundboard decided it was going to short out and no longer work, which was causing all kinds of problems with my computer and then also affecting my new microphone. So this is the only way that I can do the show for right now. I'm getting it resolved as soon as humanly possible. But NFL rule changes on the horizon, and it's a mock draft Monday. All that coming up in a little bit. But let's start things off by talking about Tristan Wirfs and the kind of money he is going to command in an extension. So obviously, this has been a topic that I have brought up many times, but what kind of money will the Bucs need to spend to keep Wirfs around to get an extension done prior to the season and prior to him hitting free agency? Outside of quarterback, left tackle is arguably the most important position on the team because he's the one that protects the quarterback's blind side, right? He has to be your best offensive lineman, and he has to be a guy that you can rely on to not give up pressures, not give up sacks, or give up hits on your most valuable commodity. That's why Donovan Smith isn't in Tampa anymore. He was not that guy. Tristan Wirfs absolutely is. Even after switching from right tackle to left tackle last season and only having 1 year of left tackle experience under his belt, he is arguably the best left tackle in the league. So last season, Wirfs allowed 24 pressures on 777 dropbacks. That's 3% for those that do not want to try to do that kind of math in their head. He received an 83.5 score from Pro Football Focus, which was fifth among left tackles. Again, his first year at left tackle, and he finished fifth, according to Pro Football Focus. He allowed 5 sacks, the first of which didn't come until the Week 11 game against the 49ers when he left the game with an injury and then came back in and battled through, ended up giving up a sack late in that game. So while you can make the argument that Wirfs is the best left tackle in the NFL, the Bucs are probably going to be making the argument that he isn't during negotiations so that they can try to get away with paying him less. That is standard operating procedure for every team in the NFL. Anything the team can do to try to pay less money to the player, they will do. The same goes, for every team, every in every position, and then the same goes for the agent, right? They are going to pump up their client to be better than they may actually be to try to get the most money possible for their client. It works both ways. That's why most of them end up meeting in the middle, and these deals get done. But there is no way that the Buccaneers could deny that he is top 5. So what are the top 5 left tackles in the league getting? Trent Williams, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. is the top paid left tackle at $23 million a year in average annual value. But where he is the highest paid is the total deal, $138 million over 6 years with 55.1 in practical guarantees. He signed this at age 32 and still has 3 years left on this deal. Next is the Giants left tackle Andrew Thomas, who signed a 5-year, $117.5 million deal with $67 million in practical guarantees and an average annual value of $23.5 million. Then you have Laramie Tunsil making $25 million a year on a 3-year, $75 million contract, $60 million guaranteed. Then you have Garrett Bowles, 4-year, $68 million deal, and average annual value of $17 million, and then $38 million guaranteed. And then finally, rounding out the top 5 is Orlando Brown Jr., who just signed a 4-year, $64 million contract with the Bengals last season with 31.1 guaranteed, a annual value of $16 million. If you go by annual value, the top 5 left tackles in the league are getting $25 million, $23.5 million, $23 million, $20 million. That's Deion Dawkins. And then $18.3 million is Jake Matthews in Atlanta. Guaranteed money at signing, the top 5, $67 million for 5 years is Andrew Thomas, $50 million for 3 years is Tunsil, $40 million for 6 years is Trent Williams, $33 million for 3 years is Cam Robinson, and then $31.1 million for 4 years is Orlando Brown Jr. So with all of that in perspective, Tristan Wirfs is younger than the 12 left tackles currently making more than he is. He is 7 years younger than Trent Williams was when he signed his mega deal for 6 years, $138 million. The Bucs are not going to let Wirfs go, and it's going to cost them a lot to get the deal done. If I had to guess, looking at the left tackle market and what has already been done, mixed with the performance of those players, I think Wirfs is going to come in just below Williams in total value, but surpass Thomas in guaranteed money and pass Tunsil in average annual value. So I am looking at Wirfs getting a 5-year, $130 million extension with $70 million guaranteed. So that's a little under $9 million less than Trent Williams' deal, but you have an average annual value of $26 million, so that's more than Tunsil, and then $3 million more than Thomas, who has the most guaranteed money at signing. This will lock up Wirfs through his age 31 season, with the extension kicking in 2025. Then if he follows Williams' footsteps, he'll get another mega deal in his early 30s. This also keeps him from being the highest paid player on the team, a distinction typically held by quarterbacks. Now, if the Bucs roll with a rookie after Baker Mayfield, that's a completely different topic. But this seems like it's a fair market value for a player that will likely be one of, if not the top player at his position within the next few years. And it's also going to set the market for his fellow draft classmate, Penei Sewell, who was also due an extension. Getting out ahead of that Sewell deal is going to force the Lions' hand if PFF's number 1 graded left tackle from last season sees Wirfs' deal and wants something equal or higher. Whereas if Sewell gets his deal done first, then the Bucs are going to be negotiating with Wirfs against that Sewell deal. So wanted to talk a little bit about that because I keep talking about Wirfs getting his extension, Winfield getting his extension, but we hadn't really talked numbers yet. And I do think that Wirfs is going to be the first domino to fall between he and Winfield's extensions to get done. But the NFL, or a genius NFL rule change, has been proposed. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, over-unders. You can even pick who's going to win it all. As we enter the Sweet 16, UConn is still the favorite at plus 240, followed by Houston at plus 550, Purdue at plus 600, Arizona at plus 900, and then after Auburn was upset, Tennessee is now the fifth highest odds at plus 1,200. Illinois had two solid wins so far and have jumped to plus 3,000 to win the national championship in Phoenix, Arizona. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. Plenty to talk about coming out of the NFL owners meetings, and hopefully my audio is a little bit better as I get this soundboard situation figured out. But are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The NFL owners' meetings are going on, and there is an interesting rule change proposal that I wanted to talk about because, honestly, I love this so much. And I think it will add even more excitement to the game. And as some people in the chat have already talked about, no, I am not talking about the NFL outlawing drop hip tackles or hip drop tackles. I am talking about one that I have not seen be voted on yet as of this live stream here on YouTube. Ever since the NFL moved the kickoff up and adjusted the rules to incentivize touchbacks, kickoffs have been a pointless and boring play. It got to the point where they should have just placed the ball at the 25-yard line and ignored the kickoff altogether. However, this new rule could make the kickoff one of the most exciting plays in the game. And I know what you're asking, James, how does the new rule work? Let me tell you. I'm going to fly through this as quickly as possible. So, the ball will be kicked from the 35-yard line, and then 10 players, not the kicker, but the remaining 10 players on the kicking team, line up at the opposing team's 40-yard line. So that's 25 yards in front of where the ball is being kicked. Now, the receiving team will line up at least 9 players between the 30 and the 35-yard line. So within 5 to 10 yards of the kicking team's players. The play begins when the ball lands or is caught in what the NFL is calling the landing zone, which is from the goal line to the 20-yard line, or when it is returned from the end zone. So the kicking team's players stay on the 40-yard line until the ball touches the landing zone or a player crosses the goal line to return the kick. Are you with me so far? Any kick that is caught or touches the ground in the landing zone must be returned. So that means no more fair catches for a touchback within the field of play. If a ball touches the ground in the landing zone and rolls into the end zone, it must either be returned or downed by the returner for a touchback, which will be taken out to the 20-yard line. If a kick does not make it to the landing zone, so it touches the ground before reaching the 20-yard line, the ball will be spotted at the 40 for the return team. And if the ball reaches the end zone in the air, the receiving team can either return it or down it for a touchback that will be spotted at the 30-yard line. And As it's always been, if the ball goes out of bounds, it will be spotted at the 40-yard line. There are no fair catches. Onside kicks can only occur in the fourth quarter, and the setup or landing zones do not change due to penalties or a safety. Only the kicking spot will change. This rule would be fantastic for the NFL because remember, they have been adjusting kickoff rules in the name of player safety, which is completely dumb because if they really cared about player safety, they would remove Thursday night games, as I have talked about numerous times on this show. But one of the big concerns is that the special teams players have a 50-plus yard head start to get up to full speed, and then the impact of hitting the returner was resulting in injuries. Now, with the shortened distance and the delayed time before the kicking team can start moving, the injuries theoretically would lessen while injecting serious excitement into the game. I mean, start to really think about the NFL 10, 15, 20 years ago. Devin Hester just got into the Hall of Fame because of his return abilities. You guys remember Deion Sanders being a return guy, Antonio Brown, Dante Hall. There was a whole motto when he was the returner for the Chiefs. Don't kick the ball to Dante Hall. Josh Cribbs, Leon Washington, Desmond Howard won the Super Bowl MVP for returning kicks. That's a part of the game that has been non-existent for the last decade because, all in the name of player safety. So now you have the opportunity for games to flip in an instant and special teams becomes much more important. I really, really hope that this gets passed and allows a new level to the game to return. You think of the kinds of superstars that can come out of this, or those situations where we used to see Antonio Brown or Deshaun Jackson go back as a returner because their teams needed an injection or a boost of something to happen to turn the tide in a game. When the XFL essentially started doing kickoffs this way, I immediately hoped that the NFL would take notice and adopt it. Now, the owners just need to do the right thing and vote to pass it. Going to jump over into the chat really quick. Let's see. G Vegas, always in the chat. Appreciate you, buddy. He says the new rule would make kickoffs more exciting. Absolutely. It actually adds a level to the game. We talk about it, on this show. We talk about it in our coverage of the teams or on Twitter. Special teams is a third of the game. That's why it was so important for the Bucs to bring back Chase McLaughlin, because they finally had a reliable kicker that could get the job done. That's why Jake Camarda has been so vital to this team, because he has been able to flip the field in bad situations, because special teams is supposed to be a third of the game. But when it came to kickoffs, they were non-existent. They were pointless. Guys were fair catching in the field of play just to take it out to the 25. They were letting the ball bounce through the end zone to take it to the 25. This rule would incentivize returning it, or it would incentivize at least, forcing teams when they're kicking off to keep it within the landing zone so that the ball doesn't get brought out to the 40-yard line or doesn't get brought out to the 30-yard line. So it completely changes the level of the game. I mean, you think about inside of 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter and your team is down by 6 points because the opponent just kicked a field goal, and now they have to kick off, and you have a dynamic returner that all of a sudden could give you the lead and swing the momentum of the game. It would be electric. No longer would you be going to the fridge to restock on, your beverages or your snacks, or letting the dog out because, it's just a kickoff. Who cares? Nothing's going to happen. They're going to touch it back. It's going to go to the 25, and we're going to go to commercial. It adds more to the game, and I really, really hope that the NFL passes that. Corey in the chat. James rocking that Illinois shirt. I almost feel bad for him knowing that my ISU Cyclones are going to bounce them Thursday night. We'll see. I heard some people talking on my way to work this morning on a college basketball channel on Sirius XM saying that UConn needs to be rooting for Iowa State because Illinois, the way that they are built, really exposes a lot of UConn's defensive deficiencies. So I know UConn's going to be rooting for Iowa State, but you know what, Corey? Nothing but love to you. If your Cyclones move on, I will root for them as long as if my Fighting Illini move on, you root for them. But yes, Illinois energy, love what I've seen out of them. And don't think for one second that I am not going to give Evan all kinds of grief when he jumps on WTSP Wednesday this week. So it is a mock draft Monday, and I am bringing you a 7-round mock draft with trades. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a live edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and I decided to do a 7-round mock draft for the Bucs using the NFL mock draft database. And yes, I accepted trades. Now, for those of you that have been to the NFL mock draft database, you know that you can kind of play with the settings a little bit. I left standard trades alone, not allowing for that Madden style force trade stuff to fleece my, fellow, drafting GMs controlled by the computer. So I did not offer any trades. I only looked at trades that were offered to me. And this is what I came away with. So when I jumped on the board at 26, I got a call from the Chiefs, and I opted to trade down, giving up pick number 26 in exchange for picks 32, 64, and 159. The Chiefs wanted Adonai Mitchell, the wide receiver out of Texas, and I ended up at pick 32 taking Penn State edge rusher Chop Robinson. Now, after the Chiefs trade, edge rusher Darius Robinson, cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry, and center Jackson Powers Johnson all went, but I would have taken Chop Robinson over all three of those guys. So I was very happy with the way the board fell to me. In the second round at pick 58, following a trade down for just one pick, the Bucs pick at 57, the Packers offered me a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth round pick in 2025 to move up one spot. I went ahead and took that, and then I took linebacker Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M, who got an 82 score from NFL Next Gen Stats at the Combine, which was the top combined score of all linebackers. Then at 64, I took Georgia guard Cedric Van Pran. At 89, I went back to the Georgia Bulldogs for safety Javon Bullard to get some reliable depth and a rotational guy at a thin position. Then at 92, I took the 6'1" North Carolina wide receiver Devontae Walker, who ran a 4.36 at the Combine. On day three, at 125, I took my guy, Audric Estime, the running back out of Notre Dame. At 159, the pick that I got from the Chiefs, I got Jarrian Jones, the corner out of Florida State. At 220, Washington State edge rusher Brennan Jackson. And then finally, at pick 246, I took Illinois offensive tackle Julian Pearl. So, according to Mock Draft Database, I got an A+ grade for the selections of Chop Robinson, Cedric Van Pran, and Devontae Walker. I got A's for the selections of Edgerrin Cooper, Javon Bullard, Audric Estime, Jarrian Jones, and Julian Pearl, and a B+ for the selection of Washington State edge rusher Brennan Jackson. So, my goal within this mock draft was I addressed starting edge rusher, which was, you guys know, my number one position of need for the Buccaneers, and starting guard in Van Pran out of Georgia. Then I got a potential starting linebacker for this season, but a for sure starter in the near future. I would bet that with um, I'm sorry, complete brain fart. With the addition of Edgerrin Cooper, he would compete with KJ Britt for that starting job. And if he doesn't win it outright in training camp, he would get rotated in, start to get a little bit of the feel of the defense. And then by season's end, he's probably your starter, definitely your starter next year, whether or not Levante David plays another year or retires. Then I got depth at safety where the Buccaneers have absolutely none, a wide receiver 3 with blazing speed, a power running back that can catch out of the backfield. I've talked about that before. You guys know when it comes to bringing in a running back, I want a guy that can do everything, but that offers something that Rachaad White can't. And Rachaad White cannot offer the kind of power that Estime can. I believe it was Lance Zierlein who said trying to tackle Audric Estime when he's got a head of steam is like trying to tackle a compact car in motion. So that's the kind of back that I want, but also you don't telegraph what the offense is doing by bringing him into the game. You guys remember those Charles Sims days. If Audric Estime is on the field, he can run the ball, but he can also catch the ball. He caught every one of his targets last season for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Then I brought in more depth at the edge rusher position. I brought in more depth along the offensive line, then a special teamer and depth at corner with the selection of Jones out of Florida State. I want to know what you guys think of that draft. Would you guys have made those same kinds of trades that I did? Would you have stood pat? Is there a position that you guys feel that I didn't take and should have, especially with some of those later round picks when I was collecting some depth? I'm going to jump into the chat again. Scotty J says he's talking about the kicking rule or the kickoff rule. He says just move it back to the 20 like it used to be done. Too many rules already. I don't agree. Coming from a ref. Look, I hate the hip drop tackle rule that they're enforcing. This is once again putting too much power into the hands of the officials for judgment calls. And it's a dangerous precedent to set, especially if you have a penalty late in a playoff game that results in that team losing because the official calls a hip drop tackle. I don't like that rule. I do love the NFL kickoff rule. I don't want to see it just go back to the 20 because that's basically where we are right now. I want to see I think the rules that they have proposed are fantastic to make kickoffs a vital and important part of the game. And that's when you see a guy, I don't know if he has returned kicks or not, but you see a guy like Devontae Walker, who I mocked to the Buccaneers at pick 92, the wide receiver out of North Carolina with 4.36 speed. If you can get him to be your return guy, this is somebody who can immediately change the landscape of the game with just one play. And it's a play that essentially is a throwaway as the NFL stands right now. Corey in the chat says, deal, referring to I will root for his Cyclones if he roots for my Illini, depending on who moves on. G Vegas in the chat says, I like how the new rule incentivizes kickers to be accurate and not just leg boomers. Bring some more skill to the position. Yeah, I agree. I agree 100% because I also said if you're going to kick off from the 35 and all these guys are just booting it out of the end zone anyway, I say that after you score a touchdown, if you kick the following kickoff through the uprights, you should get a bonus point as a way of basically getting a different 2-point conversion. You can't do it after a 2-point conversion, but if you kick the extra point and you make it, and then on the ensuing kickoff, you kick it through the uprights, you should be able to get the 2-point conversion there with the additional extra point. ACP in the chat says Cooper is good. That he is. Richard in the chat says Daniel Jeremiah has Bucks picking Darius Robinson from Missouri. Reminds me of Adrian Claiborne. I don't know if I like that comparison. I think Darius Robinson, not Chop Robinson, but Darius Robinson out of Missouri is a much better prospect through this level of the process than Adrian Claiborne was. I was not a fan of the Adrian Claiborne selection back when that was made. Gosh, I don't even remember what year that was. I know it was a Mark Dominic pick, but I was not a fan of that selection by any means. I would be completely fine with Darius Robinson, depending on how the board falls. There are other guys I would take ahead of him, but I do like what Robinson brings to the team. Narav in the chat says, did we take a tight end? In my mock draft, no, I did not have the Bucks taking a tight end. I do think that there are going to be some tight ends that are going to be really, really cheap in that second wave of free agency that comes up after the NFL draft, when teams start to supplement their roster with positions that they were not able to draft over draft weekend. And then, of course, there's also undrafted free agency, which is going to be even less expensive than that second wave of free agency that comes following the NFL draft. Richard in the chat says, digging your draft A grade. I appreciate that. And Anna in the chat says, I know how much you love Chop. I do love me some Chop Robinson. He's not my number one overall guy for the Bucks, but he's my number one overall guy that I think the Bucks have a chance at or at least a strong chance of getting at pick 26. That is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Please make sure that you are checking out everything going on over at bucksnation.com. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel with the notifications turned on so that when I go live, you know about it. And one more time, I apologize for the audio quality. Going to try to get this soundboard stuff figured out, or I'm going to throw it through my window. Either way, we're going to get the situation fixed sooner rather than later. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.